Welcome back to the Level Set. I'm here with Larry Fields, Dr. Charles Alexander's in Chicago. I'm Reddit Hudson. A lot has happened in the past week. We want to jump right into it. The St. Louis City Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner has defended herself well in the past week, producing documentation to refute the misrepresentations which have been repeatedly presented in mainstream media loudly and wrongly. But there's been an interesting development, Larry. We were talking about it before we came on this morning live relative to the Attorney General here in Missouri. I believe his name is Andrew Bailey, subpoenaing the St. Louis City Mayor, Tashara Jones, and the St. Louis City Comptroller, I believe Darlene Green, asking for financial records related to any monies that they put towards the Circuit Attorney's office. Now, in the case of the mayor, his subpoena expands beyond just the time that she's been the mayor, going back to the time that she was the St. Louis City Treasurer. What I would say in that case is, the Republican agenda has been clear forever in this state, man. Displace Black leadership, disempower Black communities, and that's what they aim to do always, legislatively. In every session in Jefferson City that I've ever been aware of, that's been the agenda, generally speaking. Now, the risk there, Dr. Alexander and Larry, for now the mayor is, this guy may have a different agenda. Why does he need those financial records, and why expand to the time that she was the St. Louis City Treasurer? She wouldn't have been responsible for allocating monies towards the Circuit Attorney's Office as the St. Louis Treasurer. That would have been decisions made by whoever was the mayor at the time and whoever was in that, position. I think the potential for him to target still more Black leadership is high. And I think that that is a political currency for them that is almost irresistible. Look at how I attack these people. Look at how I made life difficult for these people. Vote for me. Larry, you've been paying attention to this situation, and just in general, man, what are your thoughts? Because I know we see things going on across the country that we can kind of weave together into this discussion. Doc, we'll come to you talking about former Mayor Lightfoot and what the implications there are. But I wanted to get your initial reaction to this week's development, Larry.
It shows you the power of election and the importance of voting, because the individuals that are opposing Ms. Gardner, Attorney Gardner, have no shared power agenda, none whatsoever. They want all the power, and they don't want you to have any. And so, on one hand, you have to understand the gains that have been made. On the other hand, you have to protect the gains that you've made, and you need to protect them, and you need to fight for them aggressively. This is nothing new. This is always the way some of the opponents have worked. They're going to attack, they're going to attack, belittle, and they want to maintain a status quo that keeps them in power and that keeps a certain class relevant only as to the sweat of their brow. So that is the game plan hasn't changed, and we should not be surprised. What we have got to stop doing is elevating and ascending to power and attempting to negotiate with people that never are going to negotiate in good faith. And we have enough longitudinal evidence that that's where we are. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think it was Dr. Alexander that made the statement last week that the activities, the business activities and the business engine that has been accelerated in St. Louis City is something that the power structure is certainly, and I'm paraphrasing him, he may not have been this eloquent, that the power structure is envious about those that are managing those things. So they plan on taking all of that back. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, and they're going to do it by any means necessary. Keep in mind, if I can get your base to agree with me on something minute, like, okay, crime is bad. Yeah, everybody knows that. And there's too much crime in St. Louis. Yeah, there's too much crime in St. Louis. I'm with you.
Been like that for a while.
It's it's too much crime in St. Louis, and the prosecutor needs to be doing something about that. Yeah, the prosecutor should be doing something about that. Prosecutor is not doing enough about it. Yeah, so this is, I mean, this is a methodical approach to that, and they're going to go through each and every one of those offices the same way. Watch and see. Watch
Oh,
and see.
Bill,
I mean, this
Senator
is the exact
Igle
same way
already
they
started
flipped.
his pathway down that road. He already
I,
started down that road with his legislation last week, the Farm All bill. He said, no, it's not just the black St. Louis City Circuit Attorney, it's the black mayor, it's the black comptroller, and some of those aldermen, they all need to go. Let me file this bill and calling for a special election to remove them all. And who didn't see that coming?
and, one last thing before I turn, relinquish the floor over to the great Dr. Charles Alexander, the to show you the just debased moral system that this Missouri Attorney General has. He spent time this week at the Supreme Court fighting against Biden's student loan plan.
Yeah, man.
So this is an individual that has the same approach that Gafford has in terms of running for election. She gets in right now. Who does she attack? The least of all, first off, we need to get rid of Medicare. Who does he attack? The most vulnerable individuals that shouldn't have had to accumulate the wealth that they have with these student loans and so forth. He actively using our tax dollars to prevent individuals that are under the yoke of debt that they shouldn't be under. And I'm for paying your debts, no question about it. But this is, the way this system is rigged is not rigged for upward mobility for the vast majority of individuals. And when someone goes out and does that, and the government says, you know what, I'm going to at least be as fair with you as I am with some businesses, and I'm going to I'm going to defray the cost of some of those things. And your mindset and your spirit is such that you vehemently oppose that. You know what you're dealing with.
Right. Exactly. Dr. Alexander, I know you had some thoughts on
that. Not really divergent from what I typically say, and that is we find ourselves in a situation where, for a variety of reasons, we either understand or underestimate. We misunderstand or underestimate what the enemy is up to. The strategy of the enemy. And as Larry said, I mean, or I think both of you said, I mean, they're under no circumstance, is the Confederacy seeking to, share power. And so whenever these discussions are occurring and, and they find, as I'm pretty certain, that somewhere along the way, they found a Black politician on the front end of this to co-sign, the idea of coming in and usurping that, the power or authority of the circuit attorney. That we cannot continue to be vulnerable. I mean, at some point, we've talked about this over and over again. At some point, we have to be more thoughtful in terms of who it is that we are supporting at every level, and we have to be active at every level. And we have to be engaged and informed. We have to know, who these people are who are sending to represent us. We have to understand, what their individual goals are, as well as whatever it is that they say that they're seeking to do on behalf of the people. And that's just a part of it. And that's the most fundamental part of it, I suppose, is to kind of know who it is that you're thinking is speaking on your behalf. And then the other piece is, if we have a better understanding of civics, if we have a better understanding of municipal operations, we have a better understanding of county operations, and a better understanding of state and federal operations. When people bring these things in front of us, we know where to, we know what questions to ask, and know where we have some means, to disrupt their disruption. So we're better equipped to disrupt and to fight against whatever they're seeking to do to disrupt our ascension. And then on top of all of that, I'm still not sure that we appreciate that there is no arrival. We're
Right.
not going to arrive. This is a constant fight and struggle. And what happens is, every time we ascend to some particular role, and when I say we, when we actually get engaged and we put somebody in a seat, we think that in and of itself is going to, result in some other amount of change, or that in and of itself represents, the pinnacle of success, when in reality, we are in a constant struggle. This is a battle for it all. That's no.
Right.
They want all the marbles all the
Right.
time.
Right.
But we
All
don't
the marbles
necessarily
all the
understand
time.
that. They want all the marbles all the time. And we don't necessarily understand or appreciate that.
We've seen it in large spaces and small. You saw it in the aftermath of Barack Obama's presidency. He messed around and elected a black man to the seat. It's on forever.
Do you know how much? Do you know how much? Do you know prior to Shara's administration, how much of the city's contracts black contractors had?
Something single digit.
2%.
Yeah,
Do you know what black contractors have right now?
it's not high.
2%.
Yeah,
If you go back and I think the Arthur Johnson in The Broken Heart of America does a very good job of detailing exactly what we've just stated. There was a mental health, actually a hospital being built in St. Louis. This was back in, I want to say in the 30s. And it was 40s. And the politicians in that neighborhood, it was, I want to say Penrose neighborhood, had successfully negotiated with the unions for black companies to do the painting and the tile. The white business interests in this in this city said they weren't going to do anything unless they had all of the contracts, and they successfully kicked out those black trade workers, and that has been the case ever since. And
Larry made a point earlier, man, about the longitudinal evidence we have. We've seen this shit for a while. It cannot be a surprise to anybody. And like I said, man, the response you saw at the national level, what you see here locally, it never changed, man. This is literally a vestige of the Confederacy itself. The fact that you want state control of the police department here, the fact that you think you want to displace black leadership writ large in the city is a vestige, literally, of the Civil War. And for anybody in our community to find themselves either intentionally or unintentionally aligned with those who assert that position and work to make it a reality speaks to a level of unawareness that's just baffling to me, man. How the hell do you not know what's going on?
it's set up for
and I think we have to distinguish between the politician and the people. Now, The people, X number of the people are clearly unaware. That politician is fully aware of the decision that he or she makes in the interest of the Confederacy. Those aren't missteps.
You say there's some calculus involved in that, huh?
Yes. Those are decisions that those individuals make eyes wide open, for whatever it is that they, ultimately hope to achieve, at the expense of the broader community. And I think that we have to also appreciate that, because we've also been known to say things like, well, you don't know what was going on for that person at the time, or you don't know what they might have said or done. We cannot tolerate loyalists to the Confederacy. We can't. They're traitors. We can't tolerate traitors. But we also, have been vulnerable to that.
And it is a conscious decision. You're 100% right. And I mean, you can take George Wallace, for example. Now, J.L. Chestnut, which is just a pioneering attorney, and a great book to read is his Black and Selma. He says before leaving the bench, George Wallace was one of the most liberal judges he'd ever been before. He said he was the first judge to call him call him sir. George Wallace ran for governor and lost. And when he lost, George Wallace said, I will never get niggered out again. I will never be out niggered again. Did he not, Doc? I'll never be out niggered again. And it was nigger this and nigger that and nigger this ever since then. And that is the political decision that that so many of our state have made, because that base doesn't change. The suburban base may change.
Doesn't change.
That base, that MAGA base, those individuals do not change. You can count on them like the Democratic Party can count on X percentage of Black folks. And so that is what we've got to understand. And we've got to understand that, there is no compromise with them. There is a deep indoctrination with them. That's why they want to get rid of CRT, because they're indoctrinating their children with what they think CRT will indoctrinate our children with, and they don't have any idea of what it is. But their indoctrination is that the Civil War is still going on, that we won, that we should be proud, that we have, and they are still celebrating to this day. Dylan Roof, McVeigh, and all of these individuals. Kyle Rittenhouse. They're celebrating them. They call them saints. But ironically, we've got to do a better job, because it is some may say fictional show. A Snowfall is what I'm referencing, which is I think a brilliantly done show. But just as these Confederates call individuals that do mass harm to Black folks, Jews, and people of the LGBTQ community harm, they call them saints. What's the main character's name in Snowfall? Saint. That's no accident. Because we in too many cases are doing mass harm to Black folks. And so anybody that does mass harm to Black folks, to that Confederate group, are saints. And so just like you just stated, Dr. Alexander, we need to start calling some of these folks that have sold us out to Confederates saints in that vein, and deal with them accordingly.
Well, a couple of things. I'll start with the least important. I'm not sure that Singleton named him saint for any nefarious reason. But I digress. One thing, this is brief. This is just because this also goes, in that CRT space. that first statement that you made is absolutely, CRT is about their protection for what their children are learning. They don't care about us.
Absolutely not.
They don't care about what we learn. They don't care if we learn. They don't care if we know how to read or write, let alone what we read and write about. And so that CRT battle, to your point, Larry, is about the indoctrination of their children. And we have to, this is another very important point that we have to embrace. And that this is not a new issue. It was illegal for Black folks to learn. The education of Black folks has been an issue that as an issue is older than the United States. There's legislation making it legal to teach Black folks to read and write. That legislation predates the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And so this is just one of those obvious things that we are not understanding or appreciating the weight of it. You know, our ability to represent ourselves is older than the Constitution. We came here with nothing, and it is their intention for us to leave here with nothing. This is the nature of the relationship. And these are things that are easy to know. And again, I'm not so sure that, it's kind of hard to tell how many people actually don't know. But what I absolutely know is that if you know, you then have some responsibility.
For sure.
So I know that there's a percentage of people who feign ignorance because they don't want to have to fight the fight.
That's interesting.
And that
ignorance so you can stay out of the mix.
Well, let's look at that.
I didn't see what happened over there.
that is a, let's look at that point. Is the ignorance fiend because they don't want to fight the fight, or is the ignorance fiend because you're so comfortable you don't need to fight the fight?
Those two things are the same to me. So you feel, you feign ignorance because you don't want to assume responsibility for what has to be done. Now, if you don't want to assume responsibility because you presume yourself comfortable, that's all part of the same to me. And so I think you're kind of goofy if that's what you believe, because they coming for that person too, right?
They are coming for you.
We've seen this. They coming for him or her also, right? We've seen this. That it doesn't change. It doesn't change. This is the same thing when y'all used to line up and Red got that mismatch either at the high post or the low post. Y'all run that play over and over and over again. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so we can't keep acting like this isn't the case. And so we have a confederacy, and then we have traitors. That is in fact the case. And the issues that we're fighting now are the issues that have ever been fought. I realized something very, very interesting this morning. So March 3rd, so yesterday is like the 31st. It's been 31 years since the police beat the stew out of Rodney King.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so on March 3rd, 1807, Thomas Jefferson, I believe, signed into law. This, I don't know if it's called it's not sedition, but I'll look it up. But it's some kind. It was a law against that was intended to suppress insurrection. That's what it is. It's an anti-insurrection law. So so on March 3rd, 1807, he signs into law an anti-insurrection law. Plenty of people have used it. They used it. That was part of what Lincoln initially used to to go to war with the Confederates, and then it was used post Civil War in order to deal with the Klan. You know, when Ulysses Grant was dealing with the Klan, and it was also used during the Civil Rights era in order to suppress the Klan again, so that the schools in the South could open up and desegregate. But oddly enough, it was used in the wake of the acquittal of the officers who beat up Rodney King on March 3rd, 1991. And so that is just a kind of amazing thing, that law that was put in place to stop uprisings was then used to squelch the uprising that occurred as a result of state-sanctioned violence.
Mm-hmm.
That is the thing that we don't pay attention to.
Well, they
Right.
got something. They got something.
What happens to us is state-sanctioned violence.
That's
It's
right.
all codified. The responses are codified. Those things that precipitate our reactions are codified, and their response to our reactions are codified. None of this stuff is new.
And because when you make the laws and make the rules up as you go along, you can make them how you want. And sovereign immunity, sovereign immunity will get them out, of harm's way anytime.
And that sovereign immunity means that there is no consequence to them for those laws, correct?
Right. That
like,
qualified immunity is something that's really
they
proper.
cannot even can be held accountable at all.
They cannot be held accountable for any of this.
And Doc, you pointed out last week, I think it was you,
No,
that there's not only codified sanction for these things, there's a tacit sanction in the response to violence against Black people in this country. It's always disproportionate. You can be shot to death for selling loose cigarettes on the corner in New York, or no, choked to death for selling loose cigarettes in the corner. But if you murder 10 people in a church, or if you Kyle Rittenhouse walking down the street gunning people down with AR-15s, you get a bottle of water from the police, or you get a hamburger from the police. There is a message in that.
Or if you are a dirty cop and you, along with 5 Black officers, kill a brother, we will fire them immediately, and we'll contemplate whether or not you are accountable at all.
Right. I'm going to broaden the discussion out a little bit right here, because what I see in our original discussion about what's happening with the St. Louis City Circuit Attorney is a circuit attorney that came in with very clear work that she set out for herself to address the systemic racism in the system, hold folks accountable who are used to being exempted from accountability. She's done that. Many people would call that progressive. In the discussion nationally around progressive versus centrist or whatever, you've got Lori Lightfoot, your former mayor there in Chicago, who has now lost her bid for re-election after her first term. I don't know a lot about the brother that beat her in the primary, but from what I understand, his approach is more progressive in nature. And I think progressive politics, in the way that we fundamentally understand them, still are winning politics in a country whose demographic is changing. That is why you see the desperate measures taken legislatively by Republicans around the country, including here in Missouri, to displace that power, to mute the voices that create that power. What's your take on the situation in Chicago, Dr. Alexander, and how would you think that maybe that applies more broadly to politics around the country when it comes to Black leadership?
Interesting thing. So I was of the belief prior to when Mary Lightfoot, when Lori Lightfoot, announced her candidacy, in addition to all of the folks who announced their candidacy before. In that election, I was of the belief that Chicago had, with the passing of Mayor Washington and, you know, even that brief stint of Eugene Sawyer, that Chicago wasn't gonna have another black mayor. So I was totally surprised that, you know, that she was even the mayor, you know. But I think in her ascension, I think people assumed that she was a part of the progressive wave that we were seeing across the country. And people only thought that because, you know, Black woman, gay, you know, lesbian. And so they put those three things together, and in their mind, you know, conceptualize her as
Progressive,
as a progressive, but she's not a progressive. And so she comes from the you know, she has a pro law enforcement background. You know, so that's who she was, and that's really who she proved to be. So she's pro law.
Was that part of the LaShawn McDonald case that revealed that?
Yes.
Okay.
And so LaShawn McDonald was a young brother who was shot 16 times by Chicago police, and
they covered it up, lied about it.
The previous mayor, forget my man's name, Rahm Emanuel, who at one point was President Obama's chief of staff, who was the mayor, you know, so he was the mayor at the time. You know, she had some relationship to that circumstance, and you know, and others. And so when she comes into office, she proves to be, you know, pro-police, and she proves to be pro-business, but not pro-small Black business, pro, you know, corporate interests, right? And so, and I understand you got to have corporate interests, but you know, she didn't do anything that she didn't do anything in her office that would suggest that she was progressive. She didn't do anything in her office that was overtly beneficial to Black folks. She, like, virtually any kind of police activity, any questionable shootings, police shootings. We had a situation where the police raided this sister's house, and you know, held her. She was just getting out. She had just got off work, just got home. Police kicked in her door. She was taking a shower, and she's steadily telling them, "You all are in the wrong house." And you know, all of this is on body cam. And this is another one of those amazing things about body cam. It's like when it goes on, when it goes off. It's like so. All their body cams on while this lady is walking around her house naked. Nobody's body cam is ever on when they shooting folks. It's amazing. And so but they have all of this footage, right, of them treating this woman crazy. Lori Lightfoot's immediate response is, "I had no idea this happened." And she held that until when? All of the documents came forward about all of the texts and email communications about the circumstance. It is like story after story after story, in which, you know, there's some kind of police misconduct. I didn't know. Then the documents come forward, you know, and so she's got a history of that. And you know, people really have just lost faith in her. I mean, in the city council, she's rude. She's rude at City Hall. She's just not a nice person. And so, whatever, you know, whoever thought that they were a part of her constituency over the course of those 4 years, they just realized that she was a very gruff and mean and dishonest person. That was just it. And so so then you see the rise of several progressive Black candidates, and then one moderate and one person who's even further right to her, Willie, I forget Willie's last name, but he's black multimillionaire, older gentleman, successful businessman, but has, and he's run for Senate, he's run for mayor twice. I think he ran for representative, U.S. representative. So he's tried to be everything, and he tries to, leverage his money to do it. But that's essentially what happened. And so this other brother who's running, and he's running against. So Vallas won the primary, won the election. Well, yeah. He didn't win it, but he had the most votes. So you got Chicago as a 50+1 type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so he's going against Brandon Johnson. So Vallas had the most votes, and then Brandon Johnson was second. Brandon Johnson, I believe, was on the city council, formerly part of Chicago Public Schools leadership in the Chicago Public School Union. And he clearly is a progressive. Mm-hmm. And so we got this situation. Vallas hails himself as a progressive, but he's really a Republican. And got to see what happens. And so there's a lot of votes on the south side of the city and the southwest side of the city that if Brandon Johnson can get those people to coalesce, then he can win. I mean, I'm today of the mindset that Vallas, he got all the votes he gonna get. Mm-hmm. Like I think the people who voted the way that they voted are gonna vote that way again. Mm-hmm. Right. So all of those people that voted for for everybody else other than Vallas, I think they're gonna continue not to vote for Vallas. And so the issue is, can those brown and black folks, can the brother get all of those outstanding brown and black votes? If he can get all of those votes, then I think he can win. So the issue is, will the turnout be at least as good in the runoff? And can he get all of those votes that voted for other candidates other than Vallas?
Yeah. Speaking of votes and consequences and elections and consequences, looking at Washington, D.C., Larry, where President Biden has made a decision politically to leverage his position as president to kind of water down an initiative that came out of D.C. Relative to criminal justice. I know you may know a little bit more about that than I do. I was under the impression that it had to do with D.C. statehood for a while, and that he was telling them, if you can, hey D.C., if you fix this part of your proposed legislation, then I'll back it up. Of course, the part that he wants fixed is the part that the people decided that they wanted for D.C. autonomously, reflected in the policies that they've chosen for themselves. He wants that edited to align more with Republican responses in that space. And then I'll roll with you. Harkening back dangerously to 1994 crime bill, Joe. What's your take on that situation, man?
Well, the bill would eliminate most mandatory sentences and lower penalties for a number of violent offenses, including carjackings and robberies, and I think it would expand the requirement for jury trials for misdemeanors. It was unanimously passed by the DC Council.
Oh, unanimously?
Yeah,
wow.
DC, and at which in fact they overrode the veto of the mayor, Muriel Bowser, overwhelmingly 12-1 in that vote. But the GOP opposed it. Nothing, really wavers about them. They don't give an inch. If in fact it'll benefit this disenfranchised group, these former slaves, the descendants of slaves, is bad for business. That's it. And there is no compromise. And so what happens then is that the Senate has to vote on it since it's in DC. Democrats don't have the numbers right now because Fettman's out, and I think Joe Manchin is going to vote against it. And
Republican
also,
Joe.
yeah, man, yeah. Manchin's going to vote against it. Fettman's out. And I think Dianne Feinstein, I think she went to the hospital last week.
Yeah.
With shingles
Yeah,
or
some
something.
issue.
Yeah, so I think she has shingles. So that's the issue. So it's not going to pass. But surprisingly, Biden came out and and has stated his opposition to aspects of it. So it is, we still have this patriarchal relationship with the president. I'm not going to go as far as some and call him a light nationalist, but some of his policies.
I will.
Yeah, some of his policies certainly suggest that those are the spirits of a light nationalist. And I certainly would have been in that group with Dr. Alexander, probably in front of him, harder during Joe's architecture of President Biden's architecture of the crime bill and so forth. But he's, tried to repent, or appears to repent.
Right, which is why you would have thought he
I mean, I think he throws a heck of a Black History soiree in the White House. If that's repentance.
Pray tell, Dr. Alexander, I was unaware of the festivities that he engrossed himself.
That's the kind of stuff that he does, and it throws us off. At the end of the day, he's a white supremacist.
Yeah.
How can he be so definitive on that, Larry? And we still ain't got no voting rights.
I'm not. You know what? See, why you always got to start something, man? Because if you bring up voting rights, it's triggering for everybody here. I mean, were you trying to get more patience? Are you trying to get me to? Are you trying to get me to buy therapy? Because bringing up voting rights is triggering. And I'm gonna go on
manage those folks who have been triggered. Yes.
Sometimes
we need folks triggered. Sometimes we need triggering. We need triggering events because this is what it looks like.
It is. You're 100% right. I cannot argue with you at all. You're 100% right.
Let me weave a thread in for the both of you, because you all will have expertise in this area. Some of what we find egregious in President Biden's move against the will of the people in DC is that we see that all over the country, man. It's all about stamping out Black autonomy and agency and what you think is best for you. We're going to decide, and we won't leave you in a position to decide. There's an area in Georgia called Buckhead. You all may have heard of where they tried to, Larry, for whatever reason, think they wanted to separate themselves from the city of Atlanta. I don't know what the geographical alignment, how that all works together, but I know that they made a push that somehow we need a separate governance and separate everything from these folks in Atlanta. We don't like what we see. We don't want to be a part of it. What the hell is going on with people like, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is the senator from that, or the representative from that area, or from Georgia for sure, talking about a national divorce? Was that just a small scale version of what she's talking about? What the hell? What were they doing?
The actual bill was a secession bill from the city of Atlanta.
Secession bill.
That's what it is. That's what it is. SB 114, a public referendum on Buckhead cityhood. That's what it is, and it is a secession bill. So they attempted to remove themselves from the city of Atlanta. White flight wasn't enough for them. They wanted to remain where they are and yet be held separate and apart. But in the words of Samuel L. Jackson in School Days, they got a rude awakening. Because if you remember, Samuel L. told, wrongly, he was as wrong as the outfit he had on. Yeah, you N-words are still N-words as far as Atlanta is concerned, because that's the way it was held. Because, we want to be separate and apart from these folks, and we want to be separate and apart now. But the Senate, said no. No, y'all still part of Atlanta.
What's the makeup of Buckhead, man? What's the area? I'm not familiar with it.
It's the equivalent of, that's the backdrop of it.
It's like Clayton.
It's like Clayton.
Clayton.
Or Ladue.
Yeah, Clayton or Ladue.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Probably has more resources.
What would be the equivalent in Chicago, Doc?
Gold Coast.
Gold Coast. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, just so that we don't get confused by the clown show, that's that woman that y'all just mentioned. This predates her. This has been something that they've been trying to do for years, and there are parts. I mean, this is not without precedent. There are a couple of other communities that were a part of the city of Atlanta that have literally ceded in the past 20 to 30 years, and they set up their own private police force. They got their own. They manage whatever they manage, and so they've established their own separate. They were once a part of the city of Atlanta, and now they have their own separate municipalities or what have you, and they are primarily white folks who have done it. I think they did the same thing with what's that, West Fulton? I think you familiar with West Fulton, Blair?
Yes, I'm not familiar with.
I think West Fulton is probably more. I think it's called West Fulton. It's called. I mean, it's more mixed. It's more diverse, but in those couple of other areas in which this has been successful, they're primarily white areas, as is Buckhead, and they don't want to share tax burden or resources with Black folks, and that's really what is the issue. That's the question. That's the issue. That they don't want to share. They don't want to share tax burden. They don't want their tax dollars paying for little Black and brown kids or Black and brown interests otherwise. And so they want to take their money and go, and that's really what the fight is. And so, but I think this is another one of those situations where we kind of get duped in terms of what it is that we're looking at, because there's X number of folks who will think that this is an issue, and this is a figment of the imagination of Marjorie Taylor Greene, when in reality, this is how they move. Right? This is how they move. And and so
she's a test balloon to see how it's going to be received.
And so if we go back to our original conversation, I think this is the problem with Black folks in St. Louis. We don't understand that we the test balloon. That's who we've been historically. That's what Missouri has been historically. So every election you'll hear, as Missouri goes, so goes, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Missouri's a bellwether state, blah, 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 blah. Those people aren't MAGA because of that Trump guy who was the president.
Yeah.
They were who they were. We just start calling them MAGA because of him.
Because of him. Yeah.
Those people are who those people are.
They will never change.
And they ain't gonna never change. They're the same people they ever been. And that's the same thing that's happening in the Atlanta metropolitan area. And so the GOP gets a certain amount of shade from those extremists. And so there's a degree to which, Marjorie Taylor meets their needs, because she really is a distraction, much the same as Donald Trump. He's really a distraction. Meanwhile, they got all these people in all of these judicial spaces that ensure that whatever their plans are going forward, that they have legal standing in most cases, even when they don't, because the judge is going to say, gotcha, right? And so we got to pay more attention to these things. And somebody, I know somebody in Atlanta is minimizing this move, oh, this is just some white folks, but it ain't never just them white folks. There's resources tied to everything white folks do. And so we don't appreciate that. We don't appreciate what that means. And so we find ourselves very vulnerable in all of these circumstances when they're happening real time, because we say stuff like, ain't nobody gonna listen to, ain't nobody gonna vote for Trump. He ain't even got no money. I mean, we find, we went through that. We went through that only for him to become the president and, shift the course
and do damage
of power, right? Do significant damage.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that's kind of what's happening. That's kind of what's happening. We got to be mindful of that.
That sums it up. I mean,
it's literally true, Dr. Alexander, that St. Louis has had an impact in shaping so much of this nation's history, man. Like you referenced that book earlier, Larry, The Broken Heart of America. I would encourage people, St. Louis residents.
That should be required reading.
I would encourage you to read the book, man. Read the book and understand where you live, what this place is and has been. And none of this is a surprise. None of this is new. This attack on the St. Louis Circuit Attorney, now expanded subtly, but sure to become more definitively going forward against the mayor and whoever else is blacking in leadership in St. Louis. This shit ain't new, man. This is what it's always been.
And just just for full disclosure, Reddit works in the circuit attorney's office.
Yes.
But just like the good politician that was caught taking money from a company he voted in on behalf of, he would have the same sentiments if he didn't work in our office.
For sure. But I do.
I was voting this way.
I'm glad you brought that back up. I need to do it on every show.
Me get a check out of there, had nothing to do with that. Right is right, man. I'm just saying, right is right, man.
Yeah, right is right. And we're going to stay on that side through the whole process.
Right.
Doc, I'm going to loop us back to close us out. Well, really, I probably should not, because this piece deserves more time. We were going to, and I feel compelled to, cover some ground that we had intended to cover during Black History Month. For us, Black history is year-round. But we were going to.
Can I say something, Reddit?
Yeah.
With respect to Black history, we need to understand what Carter G. Woodson was doing when he started Black History Week. Black history is 52 weeks a year. That week was to identify and celebrate the accomplishments that were made during the year.
During the course of the year.
Exactly.
The last, on that Sunday, we set out to do more.
Exactly.
So March 1st, the work begins again.
Exactly.
We should not be celebrating a number of things that were accomplished by other generations. Where is our work? That is a self-diagnosis on all of us. Every February, it is an accounting. What have I done? What should I be doing? There should be mourning, personal mourning, every February, because you should have done things that you now know you could do better during the previous year. That's what should be doing. It is a month of atonement now. So we need to identify that and quit allowing individuals to get a pass because they have a program talking about something. But this really is a familiar conversation.
Right. And with that, Larry, with that eloquent discourse that you just gave us on what it is, I'm going to use that as license to do what I was going to do anyway. Although I will say this. I don't know that 5 minutes is enough time, but Dr. Alexander, you had specifically raised the issue of the anniversary back in February of Malcolm X's assassination. If you recall, and I know you wanted to cover some ground there, man, and just looking at where we are now, you know, our condition, his work, his role, his legacy. I wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on the impacts that anniversary has on you.
So, a couple of things. When I came back to St. Louis in '89, when I graduated from Morehouse and I came back to St. Louis, one of the things that I was engaged in, I was trying to start a limousine company, and so I was brokering business for several of the limousine companies, and I live in Webster, and Webster University had a Black Student Union, and the Black Student Union had booked Betty Shabazz, Dr. Betty Shabazz, the widow of Malcolm, for their Black History celebration. I had an opportunity to provide ground transportation for her with a speaking engagement. And so they gave me her contact information, and I called her and I told her, you know, I'm Charles Alexander, you know, told her the limousine company, blah, 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 and just kind of scheduled to, you know, your ground transportation. And she said, well, baby, do you drive? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, well, I don't need no limousine. You come pick me up.
Mm.
And so I spent the entire evening with Dr. Shabazz. And that's part of the reason why I went back to school when I went back to school, because, you know, much like Larry was saying in terms of the purpose of Black History Month, is that it was to celebrate the year's accomplishments and to, you know, put forth a challenge and a charge going forward. And I left that evening with her with a charge to go back to school.
Wow.
So
and
do the work for the community. And and so the other point that Larry made in terms of you know, it was, you know, we should be looking at Black History Month. We should include in our approach is that it's diagnostic, right? And that we should be able to come out of that month looking at what we've done and what there is for us to do. And I think that's also what we need to be looking at. That's how we need to look at Malcolm. He, you know, like we're having this conversation about critical race theory. These guys are examples, these brothers are examples of critical, you know, this is critical analysis. What Carter G. Woodson was doing was critical educational analysis. What Malcolm was doing was critical political and social political analysis, right? And that's what we have to do, and that's how we have to approach these things. And also implicit in Carter G. Woodson's piece is that we're not supposed to be looking at history just for the sake of history. We do want to look at our we want to look at the best of things, but we also want to look at what we need to do better and differently. And in the case of Carter G, as well as in the case of Malcolm, is that this was across disciplines. And I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't read the Miseducation of the Negro, read it. If you read it, read it again.
We should read that annually. You're 100% right.
Yeah. And because both of them were very critical about, you know, the school system and the Black school system and Black business, Blacks in political leadership, Blacks in the legal realm, and the Black church and Black clergy, right? And so I think with all of it, whether it be Malcolm or Martin or Carter G, or if we go across and we talk to Frantz Fanon, clearly there is a critique to be made about the enemy, about global white supremacy. But what we often minimize in the lectures and the speeches and, you know, the writings of all of these gentlemen is that there is a huge self critique and analysis that was always present in their work that we tend to ignore or minimize. And so the charge is going forward, you know, let's re-engage our classical studies, not just to say that it occurred or that we did it, but because it can point us in the right direction.
Hey, and on that note,
No, man, no. Hold on, Red. No, we gonna, you know, when we were at Morehouse, Doc was in, and I'll be real quick, Reddit.
go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Doc was and I'm not going to say he was a capitalist, but he was in a business program. And he was, Morehouse takes his top students on an international visit, a tour every year. Doc made that tour. I worked full time, so I couldn't even apply because I couldn't miss work. But he made that tour. And I always wondered, and I never asked him, never got around to asking him, as much time as we've been able to spend together, what was the impetus to move you from the capital aspect and the business aspect? Because there are people that we went to school with now that went and worked for Fortune 100 companies that recruited us that are retired now. How did you get from there to serving the community the way you do? And I don't want the whole answer now. I'm not going to ask you now. But that conversation with Betty Shabazz that you just enlightened us on, I don't care what the wall was, that had to be a hell of a brick to put it in there.
It was awesome. That was an awesome time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could imagine, I was as close to Malcolm X as you could be without actually being there. And to be able to deal with her and meet her and talk to her in her own right was awesome. And the reason I was in her space was because of Aaliyah Mubarak, who was my mentor. She made that happen for me. And it's just a wonderful time. But just real quick, in terms of the trip, I was always eligible for the trip and never went because I didn't want to go because I never wanted to be in that capitalist space. And so I went to Morehouse not wanting to be in that space. But my brother finished St. Louis U, got his MBA from St. Louis U like 2 weeks before I graduated from Webster Groves. And so it was always my intention to be kind of in the space that I am right now. But my parents were like, that's not a space that we see you in. And so they pushed me in the business space. My brother had just gotten an MBA in marketing from St. Louis U. So I chose marketing as my chosen career path. I did very well in the Morehouse business program. And it was poised to for the launch and the rise in corporate America, but that was not a space that I wanted to be in. I don't really feel comfortable in places where people don't want me. And so I felt though that I had some skills that I could bring back to the community. And that's what I've endeavored to do since that time.
And I'm gonna tell you, as I think I spent more time there than you did. And I haven't worked for, in corporate America in 30 years at least. I started my own piece. But it's not just being in spaces you don't want to be in. It's doing things that are totally against your community's interests.
Totally against my community's interests and totally against my barometer, right?
It is.
Absolutely, Larry.
That
absolutely.
is, I worked for a company that was bought by one of the biggest contributors to the Republican Party, and I could never make quota again.
Mm-hmm.
I never made quota once they bought them.
Mm.
So, I mean, because my body just will not allow me to do anything against my interests like that. So, Reddit, I'm sorry for going over. But
No, sir. No, I appreciate the sharing that you all have given to us today, man. And it speaks to the integrity of both of you brothers. which is why the energy on this show is always what it is, man. We welcome you all every week to join us here on The Level Set. Come on back next week, and we'll see you then.